History remembers what happened, but it is shaped by moments when everything could have turned another way. A decision, a journey, a single moment. This is where we explore them. When history turned. Sometimes I catch myself wondering why, on certain mornings, we still think twice before hugging someone with a cold. Is there a world where that hesitation never existed?
There is. Picture a city now, ordinary in every way. A woman steps out of a subway carriage with a paper cup. The sky is the same neutral gray we know. She checks her phone and opens a brief alert. A local clinic has detected an unusual cluster of respiratory symptoms. The alert names a street, a clinic, and an attached genomic readout that confirms an unfamiliar viral signature in under 24 hours. Within hours, a mobile response team arrives, equipped with targeted diagnostics and pre-positioned therapeutic stock. The scene never becomes a headline. School runs continue. The coffee shop down the block stays open. Her neighbor, sick for a few days, recovers at home, while municipal sanitation teams perform targeted interventions. Life continues, with the quiet certainty that the system will catch and close the crack before it widens.
It sounds almost mundane, a public health system that simply works, but mundanity can hide a very precise difference. In that city, when did that structure begin? Is this a recent upgrade, or the product of deep institutional memory?
The system is neither brand new nor accidental. It is the living result of coordinated investments and legal frameworks that have guided response for decades. Sentinel laboratories are networked to local clinics. Data flows in standardized formats across borders. Manufacturing agreements and surge protocols exist in regional hubs. Techniques for rapid sequencing and assay sharing are routine. The public knows the drill, not as fear, but as civic practice. Report. Isolate briefly if needed, and allow the network to act. Do you want a hint about when the axis of that network hardened into law and practice? Or shall I continue describing daily life there?
Give me the hint. I want the puzzle to reveal itself slowly, but not to be cruel.
Okay. The network's routines predate the 2000th decade. They were tested in the 1980s and grew through the 1990s. The legal backbone insists on immediate, minimally filtered sharing of pathogen data. Funding mechanisms bind public and private manufacturing capacity. Importantly, these measures were not optional. They were codified with enforcement and sustained financing. The people you see moving through that subway car learn the etiquette of reporting because it has been practiced for generations, not introduced overnight.
So the bones of the system were set decades ago. That raises the obvious question, what broke our timeline away from theirs? What was the decisive moment where we failed to build that same backbone?
Before you answer, tell me this. In your timeline, were genomic sequencing and rapid assay sharing widely available and trusted early on? Or did distrust and fragmented regulations slow their adoption?
In our reality, those tools existed but spread unevenly. Technical capability advanced, but political will and legal incentives lagged. Data sharing was often voluntary, slowed by national secrecy, commercial interests, and unclear financing models. That combination turned local outbreaks into global chains. To understand the divergence, I need to place the decisive event. The moment when political structures either embraced or deferred a coordinated, enforceable response.
Describe that decisive meeting, its constraints, and the wider context. I want dates, institutions, the immediate trigger, and why, in your reading, it succeeded there and not here.
The trigger is small, and that is part of why it is so credible. In the late 1970s, a regional outbreak of an atypical respiratory illness hit a major port city. Laboratories there, already experimenting with early genetic typing, identified a novel agent and published the sequence. Instead of fragmentary reports, a consortium of nations and philanthropic funders convened an emergency conference in Geneva in the early 1980s. They did two things at once. They agreed a binding accord that required rapid pathogen data sharing. They did two things at once. They established a fund to underwrite regional manufacturing capacity and mobile response teams.
So, the turning point was a smaller crisis that produced a legal mechanism and a financed guarantee. That single institutional choice changed incentives across decades.
Yes, from that hinge, we can trace two paths. In the alternate timeline, the 80s consolidate mandatory early sharing and the creation of regional production hubs. In the 90s, the network scales. Routine genomic surveillance becomes standard in sentinel clinics and universities. Public health training includes network drills. International law ties funding to compliance. In the 2000s, the system prevents what would otherwise have been regional epidemics, converting potential global waves into extinguished local fires. By the 2010s, these protocols inform rapid vaccine platform approvals and prearranged manufacturing authorizations. Surge capacity is predictable. When the big respiratory pandemic that reshaped our world in the early 2020s arrives in that alternate line, it is contained locally with targeted therapeutics and limited social disruption. In our timeline, fragmented data, delayed sharing, and production bottlenecks turned that same pathogen into a global crisis.
Walk me, decade by decade, through the consequences we would feel in everyday life versus what we know now. Start with the 80s and move forward.
In the 80s, the alternate timeline institutionalizes rapid reporting and seed funding. Day to day, clinicians know that a suspicious cluster will trigger assistance, not embargoes. In our reality, the 80s saw pockets of collaboration, but little enforceable architecture. In our reality, the 80s saw pockets of collaboration, but little enforceable architecture. In the 90s, the alternate timeline builds regional hubs and routine surveillance. Communities practice reporting, and small outbreaks stay local. Our 90s had scientific advances, but inconsistent deployment. Our 90s had scientific advances, but inconsistent deployment. In the 2000s, the alternate world refines manufacture surge agreements. When a novel agent appears, factories can pivot under pre-agreed licenses. Schools, transit, and workplaces have rehearsed, minimally disruptive protocols. In our 2000s, we experienced stopgap measures and unpredictable supply chains. By the 2010s, the alternate timeline has faster vaccine rollouts, targeted therapeutics staged geographically, and far fewer prolonged lockdowns. In our 2010s, the lack of coordinated capacity turned a new virus into a protracted global emergency. Finally, in the present of the alternate timeline, public rituals like hugging or going to concerts are rarely interrupted by disease scares. Responses are swift and local. In our present, those rituals were deeply altered during the major pandemic waves we lived through. When you frame it that way, the opening image, whether we hesitate to hug, is explained not by biology alone, but by institutional choices made decades earlier. The alternate world learned to translate detection into action reliably and without delay. That removed the need for chronic social distancing as a first line of defense.
If this wasn't the only timeline you'd like to visit, subscribe.